CosmWasm is starting to grow. I'd really like to see a new Interchain DAO forming, and specifically forming for public goods funding, because I think this is one of the biggest problems that we've seen in Cosmos over the years, is that projects that benefit multiple different chains don't always get funding. You're going to be able to use CosmWasm as the ultimate control plane for any chain connected via IBC. And this, I think, is going to explode the number of developers coming into CosmWasm, because you're not going to be able to build applications that control this much liquidity in any other smart contract platform or language.
Welcome to the Interop. I'm here today with Adair Kelley. He is the co-founder of Abstract. They're an Interchain app platform. And so we're going to be discussing lots of things today, including CosmWasm, the state of CosmWasm, what Abstract is, how it works, and some of the innovative things that the team is doing. Before we get started, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. I know I've been on a hiatus for the last week. We had a little bit of a break, but we're back and we're going to be back doing regular episodes. And if you like what we're doing, please consider staking with us. We're validating on a handful of networks. And also, I want to point out that Nebular Summit is happening on July 12th and 13th, and tickets are now on sale. Early bird tickets are still available. You can get them for 39 euros. Nebular Summit is going to be the largest Interchain modular app chain and Cosmos conference at ECC this year. You can expect lots of technical talks, developer workshops, in-depth panels, debates, and also a VC track where you can meet investors and get funded. Come to Nebular Summit. It's happening on July 12th and 13th, and you can get your tickets at nebular.builders. Adair, will you give a talk at Nebular Summit?
Will I? Of course. I'm really excited for this year. Last year we had a lot of app developers come and attend, so it was great to get to know the community a little bit more, and also bring the message of interoperability and abstraction to everyone in the Interchain world. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, looking forward to having you there. So you're currently in Berlin, and you were just attending a CosmWasm Hackathon. Talk a little bit about what's been happening there in Berlin and your experience at the hackathon.
Yeah, absolutely. So just last week, we had Cosmos Berlin, a Cosmos get-together right after DAppCon. And we also had the CosmWasm Hackathon, where all of the best CosmWasm builders got together and hacked on Interchain applications. And this is a new narrative that's going around the Cosmos ecosystem now that IBC development is so much easier in CosmWasm contracts than writing IBC protocols at the native chain level. So at this hackathon, we saw a lot of developers build apps that actually controlled and spanned multiple different chains, which is really exciting, especially as this is the biggest value proposition of Cosmos. And now it's as easy as ever to write these apps. So yeah, good builders, good food, and good community right here in Berlin.
How many people were at the hackathon? Building?
Around 75 people attended in person, and I know that there were around 220 signups ready to hack.
Wow, that's huge. I know you've been at a lot of hackathons. In terms of scale, was it sort of on par with some of the other things you've seen before, like larger, smaller, yeah?
Yeah, in terms of the CosmWasm hackathons, I'd say it's on par. We have a relatively close-knit community here in Cosmos, and of course, it's no comparison to the Ethereum hackathons. Though in terms of development, we saw a lot of innovation here instead of the same old projects being built again and again.
Cool. So, what kind of innovative stuff did you see at the hackathon?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we saw some interchain projects. There were two tracks there. There was Kujira's Compose, which allowed for composing different services together, and then also Neutron's integrated applications track, and of course, one of the abstract interchain app bounties. So in terms of applications, we saw two interchain governance applications where multiple different chains connected via IBC would be able to come to consensus on proposals that were sent to those chains. So for example, Archway and Juno and Neutron and Kujira could all form an Interchain DAO, and any one of them could create proposals, and their communities could vote on those proposals proposed to the Interchain DAO. And I think this is going to create a lot more interchain alignment. As I mentioned, there were 2 projects building that. There was also another project aimed at onboarding new users to Cosmos in a really fun way. So this was Rugs and Candles, and they had a bunch of different activities that users could do on multiple different chains, with one chain, which being Neutron, orchestrating those activities for users to do. That would be on Kujira, Neutron, Archway, Osmosis, any of the CosmWasm-enabled chains.
Cool. Like, I want to just maybe put a pin in that Interchain DAO thing. How does that work? Like, what orchestrates the votes?
Yeah, so actually this Interchain governance was built on top of Abstract, which is an interchain app platform, but we also have on-chain infrastructure that sits on multiple chains. So the way that this worked is that at the base, there's a state synchronization mechanism where one chain can propose a state change, that being a proposal, and that propagates the state change to the other chains. And once that is synchronized, the originating chain gets an acknowledgement back, and then they tell everyone, hey, the state is synchronized, and now you can vote on this proposal. Everyone votes individually. They synchronize their state to their other chains, and once the proposal has expired, the votes are tallied, and then the proposal is executed.
Okay, so there is no, practically speaking, like there is no sort of central orchestration mechanism. The chains are reaching consensus together as if you had like a blockchain of chains per se,
yes,
of sorts.
And the funniest thing about this is that you could build a blockchain with this kind of application, which we are calling a mesh application, where there's not a central hub. Because traditionally, interchain applications have a hub and spoke model, where there's one controller chain and multiple chains that listen to commands from that controller chain. So I hope that we see a new wave of these applications. Of course, the very first one of these being mesh security, which pioneered by a couple CosmWasm OGs in years past.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And so this was all built using Abstract.
Yes. So one of the projects did do a hub and spoke model, and the second project was this mesh governance model.
Okay, nice. And what were you working on at the hackathon?
Mesh governance.
You were, okay, so that was your project.
Yeah, my co-founder and I, Robin, he and I built this mesh governance using Abstract's new IBC features, making it really easy for contracts to talk to one another across multiple chains. And of course, this doesn't restrict you to just having one contract calling another one. You can have one contract call this other contract that calls another contract on another chain. And so this allows you to create really interesting loops and mechanisms like this mesh consensus that we devised.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, and what's going to come out of this? I mean, are you going to like build this in as a product in Abstract? Like I realize we haven't really gotten into Abstract yet, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd really like to see a new Interchain DAO forming. And specifically forming for public goods funding, because I think this is one of the biggest problems that we've seen in Cosmos over the years, is that projects that benefit multiple different chains don't always get funding, because every chain is trying to drive as much value as possible to itself, to the application. This is part of the app chain thesis, so of course it makes sense. Though when you have infrastructure that spans multiple chains, the chains themselves, they only want to fund things that drive the value there. So with an Interchain DAO, the chains can vote on allocating funds to projects that may benefit multiple chains in the ecosystem. And I hope this creates a new paradigm because the Cosmos Hub and the AEZ Quadratic Funding Program is still, a centralized entity. It's still something pushed by the, Cosmos Hub, and maybe the CosmWasm chains want to form some sort of a DAO and vote on CosmWasm tooling. And,
with the recent shift or sort of changing of the guard at the ICF Foundation Council, one could imagine maybe having that organization run by a DAO of chains that utilize Cosmos SDK technology, IBC, and that are directly impacted by its funding. I mean, it's an idea, maybe an interesting thought experiment, but so yeah, I'm curious. Like, you're like really deep into CosmWasm. I think like of everybody I know, like you're one of the sort of most respected developers in the space, and really pushing the boundaries of what is being done with CosmWasm. What's your sense of how CosmWasm as a language, as a community, sort of as a pool of developers has been evolving since you came into Cosmos, like 2 or 3 years ago, I guess. Like what's the state of CosmWasm in your view?
State of CosmWasm is starting to grow. And this is something that's like really important, like kind of a shift that we're seeing. Now that the tooling in CosmWasm has caught up to that of Ethereum and that of Solana and other competing ecosystems, competing collaborative ecosystems, I'm seeing a lot more developers flow into CosmWasm. We've seen like a steady inflow of these developers on the CosmWasm website. If you look at the adoption tab, there's a lot more devs, there's a lot more transaction, there's a lot more apps. And I think this is because of the being able to leverage the interchain capabilities of the Cosmos ecosystem. With new features coming in CosmWasm 2.0, with IBC a little bit more deeply integrated with better error messages, developers are going to have an amazing experience, meaning that they're going to be able to build apps faster, which provides a better business case for building apps in CosmWasm. Additionally, I think with projects like Union and Polymer bringing IBC to EVM chains, you're going to be able to use CosmWasm as the ultimate control plane for any chain connected via IBC. And this, I think, is going to explode the number of developers coming into CosmWasm, because you're not going to be able to build applications that control this much liquidity in any other smart contract platform or language. So CosmWasm is growing, and right now we actually have around 300 or so active developers in CosmWasm, and around 3,000 that have actively tried CosmWasm and built an application in the past. So yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure what the numbers are here, but like if you compare that to like other alt VMs like the Solana VM or the Move VM, like for instance, I think like Move is getting a huge boost this cycle with movement, sort of creating the modular move narrative and ecosystem. Solana VM is obviously like also on a tear because Solana's on tear. Solana VM is being used also for other sort of like non Solana L1 projects. And then there's like all this sort of parallel EVMs by Say and Monad. Why is it that CosmWasm hasn't sort of picked up in this alt VM narrative as much as other ecosystems or like other VMs?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the easy answer is that all of the users, all of the TVL, all of the applications are on Ethereum. They're on EVM chains. The tooling is amazing. It's incomparable to some of the other ecosystems. On Solana, you have a lot of hype. You have all of the users creating tokens. There's a lot of activity in this ecosystem, and this means that as a developer, you have the most distribution in these ecosystems. If you build an app on Ethereum, you could bring that to the millions of users that are already on Ethereum. Same with Solana. You publish an app, and it's available in the Backpack wallet, and everyone using that wallet can see your app there and start interacting with it. In Cosmos, we have a lot of these different app chains. They all trying to, again, drive value to themselves. So there's not one audience that you're driving value or you're bringing your application to that you can distribute to. As an application developer, I think the most important decision that you have to make is what chain do you deploy on? And as I mentioned, it's always going to be Ethereum as a first choice, unless you run into performance problems, in which case it'll be an L2. The users are already there. And what we have to do as Cosmos is, because we have this amazing technology and because we can define new, innovative user experiences that they haven't seen before, we need to unify the interchain. We need to bring all of the users all in one place. where they can use any of these apps regardless of that chain. We should make it so that Cosmos has the best onboarding experience of any ecosystem because we can. We're not limited by the VM. We're not limited by innovation. Cosmos hasn't seen it because there's no one pioneering this yet.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. So let's get into Abstract. What is Abstract and what problem is it solving?
Yeah, so Abstract is an interchain app platform. For developers, what this means is that you can build apps that work on every single chain in Cosmos. You can build apps that control different chains in Cosmos, and you can build apps that are automatically integrated with the DeFi protocols that are primitives in this day and age. So that's DEXes, that's lending markets, oracles, liquid staking tokens. You build applications abstract of these protocols. So using the Abstract SDK, we have a really easy to use framework for building CosmWasm apps, somewhat similar to React versus TypeScript. Abstract SDK is a framework for CosmWasm app development that allows you to build them modularly, where you put these different components together to form more complex, advanced applications. And the core infrastructure here is the Abstract account. The Abstract account is our smart contract wallet that you can extend with these modules. And more on that later. As a user, Abstract is the one place where you can go, discover, and use applications on the Interchain. And one of the biggest qualms with users onboarding is having to know what chain it is, having to know how to pay gas fees, and having to IBC your assets over. Abstract removes that need entirely using these Abstract accounts. And this gives users one place to onboard to the Interchain and use any application on any chain.
Okay, so let's maybe like get into a practical example here. Like if I'm an application developer, let's say I want to build a new DEX on Neutron. At which point do I start using Abstract, and what things will Abstract enable as I'm building this application versus if I was just building it natively on Neutron?
Yeah, so Abstract, if you're building a new DEX, you can integrate your DEX with the Abstract DEX adapter, and that means that anyone who's built an application on top of a DEX, for example, an auto compounder or a DCA application or a portfolio rebalancing application, would be able to use your DEX's native liquidity. I would say that DEXes aren't necessarily the best app to be built on Abstract. Those best apps are going to be ones that leverage or that use the user's assets, perform strategies on them, or that need to have outposts available on multiple different chains. If you're a DEX looking to add outposts where users can trade your assets on any of the chains connected via IBC, then Abstract is your best bet here. You can create these outposts using these Abstract accounts, which can control other Abstract accounts over IBC.
All right, so as a developer, I can use the Abstract account to essentially like have like an outpost account on another DEX or on another chain, and then the users, like Abstract sits sort of in between the user and the applications on the other chains, and it's performing actions for the user on that other chain. So it's sort of like intermediating those actions with a sort of abstracted level that makes it easy to interact with sort of similar types of applications on other chains, right? So like if you have, say like a DEX on chain 1 and a DEX on chain 2, and those DEXs may not have like the exact same contract calls, to a developer, like when you're using Abstract, you're just sort of making one function that is doing like a swap, for instance, and then Abstract just knows how to do a swap on Osmosis, but also on Astroport or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So you build applications with the, using a DEX that has generic actions like swap or provide or withdraw liquidity. And this will work on any DEX in the Cosmos ecosystem. We're integrated with Osmosis and Kujira and Astroport and Windex and Astrovault. And any new DEX is really just a simple integration away. So with your question on the abstract outposts, like the abstract account outposts, these work as smart contract wallets that abstract away the complexities of interacting with IBC or creating transactions on external chains. So I mentioned that the abstract app platform allows you to interact with apps regardless of the chain that they're on. This is done through these abstract accounts. So you have a home chain. Let's say that home chain is Neutron. You can control apps on Kujira. So you're going to perform a swap on Kujira. What you do is you actually initiate that transaction through Neutron without your knowledge, and it goes and executes on Kujira and gives you the result right back. So it's an abstraction layer, if you will.
Hence the name. Got it. So like, how does this scale though? Because I mean, I guess like for things like DEXes, you integrations may be fairly simple, but as different types of applications with different use cases, whether those are like derivatives markets or social applications or gaming or whatever type of use case people are building, Abstract then needs to start building adapters for all these applications. And if we're ending up in a space where there's potentially like thousands and tens of thousands of apps, like how do you deal with the level of complexity of like all these applications?
Yeah, and that's where the abstract modules come in. So these modules are developed using the abstract SDK that encapsulate certain functionality. These modules are not only developed by Abstract. They can be published by any developer building these applications. They claim a developer namespace. Let's say that's SEB 3.0. You publish a module under this namespace, and it's available to developers building applications elsewhere. So the scenario that you mentioned with there's all these gaming and social and DeFi applications is actually a perfect scenario, because it means that there's a lot of modules that are available for developers to put together to create new innovative applications. And this was the original thesis behind creating Abstract, is that years ago when Robin approached me with this idea, it was to allow developers to collaborate in building applications. Because previously in Cosmos, every developer is just like the app chains. They develop in silos. They don't communicate or collaborate with any other teams. But with Abstract modules, you can just compose them and put them together and create this collaborative ecosystem that we need to grow as Cosmos and as the Interchain.
Okay, so you have sort of like a package manager or something like that that allows developers to push packages and
Yes. Yeah, this is part of the on-chain infrastructure. So it allows developers to publish these modules with versions and dependencies to each of the chains, and anyone who takes any application that takes a dependency on these will be able to resolve that code ID, which is kind of like the identifier for the actual on-chain code, and use that directly in their application. And something else that this enables that is really useful for developers is dynamic on-chain upgrades. So let's say that you're building an auto-compounder and you want to add a new DEX. The DEX adapter is going to have an update, and that update will be pushed on chain, and then you can take that instance of the auto-compounder, call update on it, and it'll pull down that new version of the DEX adapter and swap it dynamically so that you can get access to those new DEXes. Or if there's a bug fix that is pushed, you can pull that directly down into your application and upgrade that dynamically. And we also have a little bit of protections in place for bad upgrades. So let's say that you're trying to skip to a second major version. Abstract's infrastructure will ensure that the dependencies for that version are also installed, fully compatible, and make sure that this on-chain state transition goes smoothly. Otherwise, it'll roll back.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about the protections and the security. So like, if you look at like Ethereum contracts, for example, we have like the Open Zeppelin contracts. These are tried and tested contracts that have been, audited, used by like thousands of projects, and are very like carefully scrutinized for bugs and vulnerabilities. in the case of abstract, how do applications know that the modules that are being published by just sort of, for lack of a better word, random developers are secure and are not going to jeopardize their users' security?
Yep. Yeah, that's a really important question. Every abstract app, so our platform is a permissioned application platform. So every one of the modules that gets uploaded needs to be approved. We have a standard for developers to upload metadata for those applications with links to the audits, to the name, description, and details of the developers themselves. We want to make sure that anyone using modules on the abstract platform can be assured that they're using something that has been audited and is secure, and so they don't get exposed to unnecessary risk.
Right. And when you say they're uploaded, like they're uploaded to all of the CosmWasm chains that support abstract, or is there some sort of like centralized orchestration mechanism for all these modules?
Yeah, currently it's every CosmWasm chain that supports abstract, and the checksums are verified between the chains so that we can assure devs that if they depend on an app on one chain, they can get, and they have the same version on another chain, that they can be guaranteed it's the same checksum between chains.
Okay. I mean, this security kind of process that you described, do you think it's sufficient? I mean, because like as this scales, like one thing that stands out to me as potentially problematic is that, people can publish modules there. Okay, there's maybe like a link to some audit, but that requires some kind of human verification to check whether that audit is real, for instance, at the least, and that might be difficult to scale if there's like lots of different applications being built there, and I don't think it takes very I think a very targeted vulnerability, with one very highly dependent application, or an application that a lot of other apps depend on. We've seen this with like kind of supply chain attacks in Web 2. Like how do you ensure that supply chain attacks can't happen in abstract?
Yeah, of course we can't guarantee that this is never going to happen, though there are two types of modules within abstract. There are app modules, which are per account, per instance, and they have specific configurations per instance of the application. And the adapters are not migratable. So if you have a DEX adapter, you actually get a static address that does not expose the migrate function, which protects you from the publisher of that DEX adapter migrating it and kind of potentially rugging you of your liquidity. On the supply chain side, we are looking to create a platform to incentivize people to expose these vulnerabilities on test nets or on testing environments by having like continuous hackathons and continuous bug bounties, where if you expose a bug that might expose 100 million worth of liquidity, then you get a very sizable bounty for giving that bug report and exposing it. Additionally, on the application side, every app has a suspend function that is callable by the owner of that application. So if there's a vulnerability that's published, Abstract can expose a service that would automatically pause the applications that may be affected by one of these attacks. This is something that's very common in Web 2 companies, but it would, of course, be an opt-in service, as would, for example, automatic updates.
What about the deployment? Like, how easily does that scale? Because you have to deploy these apps or these modules to all the CosmWasm chains, and of which there could be many, many, right? Like, if you just think of like Initia, for example, Initia is a roll-up as a service platform where CosmWasm, you can build CosmWasm apps there. So potentially there's like lots of applications there, and so every time a new application comes out, you have to deploy it to N chains. Like, how easy is that?
We have this amazing tool called CW Orchestrator that actually makes this easier than writing a bash script, or easier than doing it any other way. So CW Orchestrator is a chain-agnostic CosmWasm scripting, testing, and deployment tool. So it supports a variety of environments, whether it be CW multi-test for unit testing or integration testing, TestTube for integration testing, or live environments like the different chains or different test nets, or Initia rollups. And we have a standard for publishing your modules off-chain. So the WASMs for your published modules must be available in crates, or well, they can be available in crates. And essentially what this means is that when developers go to publish an application, if the app is not existing on the chain, it will be uploaded and published automatically when your app is also published. So, and this scalability issue is, of course, true of any blockchain ecosystem. We are hoping to kind of automate this. So for key applications like the DEX adapters or any of the DeFi adapters, we want those to be continuously pushed to every one of the chains. And we'd also like to see applications leveraging the interchain capabilities and actually having some of the logic be potentially on another chain that offloads the kind of the stress or the computational usage on the origin chain, and also kind of pushes the interchain thesis a little bit further.
Okay, so we've talked about the SDK. The SDK is what allows you to build modules, like modules that interact with contracts on Abstract. We've talked about the CW Orchestrator, which allows you to deploy contracts, not only deploy, but like test and do migrations and everything that's needed to ensure that contracts can be deployed to like a multitude of CosmWasm chains and applications. We haven't talked about Abstract.js, I think. What is Abstract.js?
Yeah, Abstract.js is the front-end component to Abstract that allows you to really easily interact with those modules that you have published to the chain. Has type generation capabilities powered by Cosmology's TS CodeGen. It also gives you a lot of handy hooks for interacting with your application, whether that be querying state, mutating state, or doing anything with the Abstract accounts. Recently, we've added a ton of IBC abstractions so that when you're interacting with an IBC application, it's no different than interacting with an application on one chain. Just like in the Abstract SDK, you as a developer shouldn't worry about the complexity of these integrations. You should just be building this application that works across multiple chains, and Abstract.js simplifies this as well. I think the second component to Abstract.js, or well, not I think, it is the Abstract API. And this is an API that sits in front of the node for the chain that you're using, and allows you really easy access to all of the Abstract accounts, the modules, Abstract name service for assets, contracts, and pools, as well as any of the components associated with Abstract. This is fully self-hostable, it's fully open source, and gives you very fast access to any of this data that you may need. And it's integrated in Abstract.js.
So which chains do you currently support?
Yes, I'm going to preface this with I may forget one or two chains in this list because there's a lot. Currently, it's any chain that supports CosmWasm will support Abstract. We are infrastructure that sits on top of the chain, but currently we're deployed on Neutron, Osmosis, Kujira testnet, Juno, Archway, Nibiru, Zion, Rollkit testnet, and a couple other CosmWasm chains. And I know that we're on over 12 different chains, and we're looking to become a default deployment for Rollkit rollups with CosmWasm, as well as Strangelove roll chains with CosmWasm VMs enabled as well.
Cool. And like, how easy is it for you to integrate with new chains? So, you know, like new CosmWasm chain goes up, and what's the process there? If it's a permissionless chain, does governance need to interact or intervene at all, or can you guys just deploy there?
Yeah, so for any permissionless chain, it's literally a 5-minute setup script using CW Orchestrator. And the most intensive part is setting up the polytone channels for the IBC infrastructure.
What's a
So
polytone
every
channel?
abstract
I've never
enabled
heard
chain.
this before.
Yes, so polytone is a wonderful on-chain, or it's a wonderful piece of on-chain infrastructure that allows for an account, a smart contract on one chain to control a smart contract on another.
Right.
All of Abstract's IBC capabilities are built upon this, and this needs to be deployed on the chain, and channels need to be created between that chain and any of the other chains that chain wishes to communicate with. So for example, if you're spinning up a new roll kit rollup, you're probably going to want to connect with Neutron and Osmosis. And that you create the channels between that new rollup and Neutron and Osmosis. And you also have access to the rest of the Abstract ecosystem, if you will, through multi-hop IBC.
Okay. And so I was looking at your website, and there's like this module registry. Like I'm just reading off some of the modules here, like the DCA module, the ETF module, CW staking, money market. So what are these modules, and like how are they being used by developers?
That's a great question. So the DeFi modules that you mentioned, the DEX module, the CW staking module, lending market module, those are abstract adapters, and they currently support almost every DeFi protocol in Cosmos. And those are leveraged by apps that you mentioned, such as the DCA application or the portfolio application, I think, or the ETF application. So these apps are abstract app modules that are available on any of the CosmWasm chains where Abstract is. And developers can leverage these to build more advanced applications. So for example, the ETF module, you can combine that with the DEX module to allow for swaps, and you can write a new module on top of this that would allow for setting weights of the assets in the ETF. And this really highlights module composability, and anytime that the ETF is used by the balancer application, like this auto balancing weights, it will be like readily available, I suppose.
Okay. And how do you send email over IBC? 'Cause there's an IBC mail client that I'm curious about.
Yeah, so IBC Mail is something that we did for the Celestia Infinite Bazaar Hackathon, and it is potentially the most inefficient messaging system ever created. But it allows one abstract account to talk to another abstract account on any of the chains. And so the original idea behind this was anyone could spin up their new rollup. You can have the SEB 3.0 rollup right now. And if you're connected to any of the other abstract-enabled chains, you're of course going to want to be able to communicate with them. You're going to want to send Adair a message on the Adair rollup. Yeah. And so you can install the IBC Mail client and send a message to Adair, and you just specify the path. So if we're 3 hops away, let's say that you have to go from Osmosis, Archway, and then Adair, then you'd specify that kind of like subdomain path. You'd be Adair at archway.osmosis, and then it would resolve this path and send me a message on my client.
What's the use case for this? I mean, is it like notifications, airdrop notifications, or I don't know, like why would you use this?
So, okay, the original idea was actually to have DAOs be able to message individuals on their favorite chains. So if I have if I'm RackFM DAO or something, and I have a bunch of users on Juno, Osmosis, and Neutron, I would want to send a blast notification to them with, hey, there's a new proposal to vote on. And that proposal would be included in the body of the message that gets sent to them. And then on their receiving chains, they would be able to interact with that proposal and say yes, no, or abstain directly from that message, which would send the message back and enable just a lot smoother experience as a user. The second thing that this enables is more social applications. So if you think about the early days of the internet, we had these bulletin board services between multiple different chains or multiple different computers or networks. And this mail application also can serve as a bulletin board for each individual. And I think this adds a lot more fun social components to it. So if you have a bad kid, I can post a message on your bad kid board and anyone else can see it. Or like maybe I can send some tokens or something like that. It's just fun.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, I think there's some interesting use cases here, maybe for like DAOs messaging their users. I know that there's like other protocols that are doing sort of similar things in Ethereum, like this Ethereum push notification service, or like these sorts of things. How does Abstract branch out into Ethereum? What are the prospects of Abstract applications seamlessly interacting with Uniswap or CowSwap or any other application on an EVM?
Fabulous question. Okay, so recently we've seen new protocols such as Union and Polymer connecting IBC to EVM. And they're doing this through a variety of means, though we're closely partnered with Union to allow for any Abstract application to control Ethereum accounts, liquidity, applications, directly using CosmWasm. And this gives you infinite programmability on the CosmWasm side with the best tooling and the best ease of use on that side. And you can write complex logic there where all of the calculations are done and all of the expensive things that you don't want to be doing on Ethereum. And you just use Ethereum or any EVM IBC enabled chain to do the execution of those strategies. So I see this being really useful for vaults protocols or for protocols looking to orchestrate different liquidity sources on different chains connected via IBC. And also, it's kind of similar to what Sommelier does by creating vault strategies directly from their Cosmos SDK chain, though you can do this now in CosmWasm. And I think this is what's going to drive an influx of developers to the CosmWasm and Cosmos space, because you're not going to have to deal with the technical limitations of Solidity or the EVM. You're going to be able to write directly in Rust and create better applications for the foreseeable future.
How far away is that? Like, when does Abstract start, allowing users to bridge funds into some account on Ethereum and swapping tokens and bridging them back? Like this is kind of like dream use case of being able to interact cross-chain over Union into Ethereum from Cosmos. When is that going to be actually tangibly possible?
Yes, so this is tangibly possible on Union testnet between Ethereum testnet right now. And Union has a CosmWasm chain, and of course a deployment is a 5-minute script away. So we're looking at, I think, 3 to 6 months before this is brought to developers in the Cosmos ecosystem, allowing them to bridge, send tokens, interact with DEXes on Ethereum. Abstract is really trying to push this forward as the future of Cosmos is Interchain, and Ethereum is included in the Interchain. So around 6 months.
Ethereum's a Cosmos chain.
Yeah, Ethereum is an interchain. Ethereum is part of the interchain. Ethereum is not a Cosmos chain. And actually, if you want to watch a panel on what is Cosmos, check out the recordings from Cosmos Berlin last week where Avril Wilson and I talk about this as well.
Cool. So you guys put out this blog post recently about MiFi. What is MiFi? Can you explain this?
Yeah, so MiFi is a new era of DeFi where the users retain full sovereignty over their assets. And I think this is really important as we see more advanced DeFi protocols getting deployed because users are losing control of their funds. So in these new DeFi protocols, say that you're building an autocompounder. Oftentimes, this autocompounder, you'll have a vault that's where your liquidity is pooled with all these other users' liquidity. And this vault itself is managed by the developers who publish this. And this is all fine and dandy until one of those developers decides, okay, I'm going to rug you today. And then they rug that entire vault. And they take the control away from you because those developers are in control of the application. With MiFi, which is short for My Finance, i.e. your finance, you retain full control. And this is something that's enabled by default by the Abstract SDK because every Abstract application is owned and controlled by the end user. So when you go interact with an autocompounder on Abstract, what's actually happening is that you are installing that autocompounder on your own account. And this takes these modules and instantiates them. It creates this infrastructure on your own account, and you deposit into that account where the smart contracts in that account actually are the ones performing that strategy on the assets. So you get maximum yield and maximum control. Anytime that those developers publish an update to the application, you can pull it right in, and you keep that control. The second thing that's really important about MiFi is that developers are no longer financial custodians. You're no longer a fiduciary, and this reduces your legal risk significantly. You're not going to have to spend those countless hours creating a terms of service because you are custodying users' funds. You're not going to have the legal implications, like the SEC coming barking at your door because you're custodying those users' funds. The funds stay in the hands of the user. And so you're protected as a developer, you're protected as a user, and I think this is one of the most important concepts in DeFi going forward.
Okay, so just to kind of summarize here, the idea is that you have this account, this on-chain account that is controlled by the user on, like counterparty chain. That account is executing strategies on behalf of the user, like auto compounding, like DCA, instead of putting funds in a contract and having the contract of another chain that is not managed by the user perform those actions.
Let's bring this back to like just one chain. So if you have an Abstract account, and when you go and install an application, what happens is that you create a new Abstract account and it installs the modules for that application on the account. So for the autocompounder, that would be the autocompounder module and the DEX module, and the staking module.
So for actions that have some kind of like timed action, let's say it's like auto compounding once a day, what or who is initiating those transactions when they need to happen?
Yes. So it depends on what the chain's capabilities are. So if you're on a chain like Neutron or Juno that support the cron module, you're able to, the module will set up that cron job automatically. If you're on a chain that doesn't have this infrastructure, there's an endpoint on the autocompounder application that you can give a kind of proxy. You can delegate the permissions to execute on that endpoint to an external account that may be running a script. And this does not relinquish any control from you because, of course, by delegating permission to access to execute on that endpoint specifically, it is not giving access to any of your liquidity or the underlying strategy itself.
Sure.
So you still maintain that control of the assets.
What's the prospect of integrating like intents with this so that abstract accounts can be utilized in tandem with an intent system? Like what are you guys sort of thinking about here?
Yes, this is of course something that will happen at scale, especially with cross-chain transactions. There's a lot of MEV opportunities there. So the way that I see that happening is that anytime that a module goes to perform a swap or perform an action that moves liquidity from one chain to another, it actually goes into an intermediate contract that actually sets up that order. And then we have an off-chain order filler that will look at all of the orders, try to match them, and then solve those orders. This is actually something that the TimeWave team has been hacking on recently. I know that they submitted a project called orbitals to the CosmWasm Hackathon doing exactly this. And so once there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of users using abstract accounts and performing these actions with their tokens, I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity for solving or making those actions a lot more efficient. As, of course, performing actions across multiple chains isn't the most efficient thing in the world.
Yeah, I think you're familiar with 42. Like they were on the podcast recently, and they are building a front end that effectively allows users to leverage AI agents to manage their portfolio. What's like the potential interaction here between like a 42 front end and an abstract account to create some sort of a cross-chain, cross-application DeFi portfolio that users can manage from one place? It's like you get the front end and the kind of like back end infrastructure working together.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the best way for this to happen is that you take that AI agent that is creating these DeFi strategies. Let's say that it's creating asset allocations. And you give that AI agent permissions to update the allocations of those assets on an abstract account, on an abstract application. For example, the balancer application that I mentioned earlier, which allows you to create a portfolio of assets with different allocations for each. 50 Osmo, 25% X, Y, and Z. Then the AI portfolio manager would update those balances, and the orders would be created on chain, and they would be submitted to this intent system, which it would be solved, and then the portfolio would be updated. So, yeah.
Cool. So what's on the roadmap, and where can people go to learn more about Abstract and interact with you guys, maybe build on Abstract?
Sure. So on the roadmap, as I mentioned earlier, is we're looking to allow CosmWasm devs to control applications, accounts, and liquidity on Ethereum. And we're also bringing a brand new experience to users of the Interchain. We want to allow Abstract, with its multi-chain infrastructure, to become the best place to onboard to new apps on the Interchain with the Abstract app launcher. And this is the App Store and the app interaction portal. And so look forward to that soon. You can check out, sign up for the beta on abstract.money. If you're a developer looking to build applications on single chains or multi-chain applications, definitely check out docs.abstract.money and follow us on Twitter at abstractsdk. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on today, Sebastian.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Appreciate it.